deceptive, manipulative.
He's also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments.
I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Eerie Americas. This is your host, Vicky Ayala.
This is your other host, Kristi Hull. What's up, people?
We actually had a super duper treat. One of our personal inspirations, Crime Junkie podcast, which if you listen to True Crime, you already know who they are. We don't have to explain who they are.
And if you don't, you must listen. We haven't recommended a lot of other podcasts here, but it's something that Kristi originally introduced me to, and it is by far probably besides ours, is my favorite.
With reason.
They deserve it, for
two
sure.
Females, Indiana, very thorough research with strictly true crime. Like, they are strictly true crime. I know we do a lot of supernatural, paranormal.
No, they are just true crime.
They are strictly that, but Ashley, she goes into research that is like, makes me jealous. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't know how she finds all these things.
It's because she like volunteers or something for Crime Stoppers, and I love that's what they raise money for, and they love dogs. Her co-host Britt is amazing in that she she adopted her kids. I just love their backstory.
They're
also.
great.
They're great humans,
and their general rapport with each other is just amazing. You can tell they're friends forever, like how you and I are. They're great, and we got a chance to see their first live tour, and they were phenomenal. You could tell they were nervous, but they did so fucking great. Like, guys, you were in Brooklyn. You did amazing. We are so proud of you.
We're a tough
We are a tough audience. You captivated every single human.
I've never we've been to concerts, we've been to shows. We were screaming so loud, cheering so loud. The minute the intro music went on, everybody just lost their shit. And also, it was Pride Sunday, and you guys came out in your rainbow outfits, and I love you guys for shouting out
we
Pride.
love you guys. Happy Pride Month. We have friends, we have family. I know this is dropping in July, but we are such advocates for the LGBTQ community. We love you guys. We are so goddamn proud.
It's a huge part of my life. A lot of things are going on in the world right now. A lot of things going on in the country right now, but you're never, ever going to shake some New Yorkers. There are some bad ones, but for the most part, you're not going to shake us. You're not going to shake our tolerance. And there was
no better way to end Pride Month. This was June 30th. They were here. And we just saw so many people, all different races, all different colors, just coming together. And just every single person, every time they spoke, was hushed in that stadium.
And that's the thing,
it was amazing.
I've gone to all these different types of things, and people never shut up. And when they said, put your cell phones away, be quiet, don't talk about the case, they fucking listen. I'm telling you, you could not tell that was, if you listen to it, you cannot tell it's a live taping, because we were just so quiet, because we were so wrapped up in the case. She engages you. We were in the balcony, and I probably felt just as engaged as a person all the way in the front of her. Yep. It was amazing, and I didn't think I could love them anymore, and I do. You guys are fucking amazing.
And we're so proud of them. They said that they're expanding to 15 other cities. That's amazing. I am praying that I can run into them in Denver. I don't care if it's the same case. I want to see them again. That is how
They could tell me this. They could literally just sit there and tell me about my own life for a whole hour, and I will just sit there and be like, really?
Well, I hope I'm never a Brit and Ashley case.
I'm really my life is boring.
We still love you guys, and you guys did amazing. We support you. We are all about female podcasters. These women deserve every single fan
all the
they
praise
receive,
they get,
everything. We do not. They are amazing. We were blown away. They inspired us to new heights.
Yeah, when we started this podcast, I actually wasn't a crime junkie yet. Kristi was, and she introduced me to them. And one of the first things she said when we were trying to figure out the format of our own show and talk about what it was, the first thing she said is, you have to listen to them. The research is so good. We need to be this good with our research. And that is what we modeled our research after. So when one of the things that we can say is, when they asked her, how long does it take for you to research cases? It takes, I think Ashley said, about 30 hours. And we do the same thing. We do the research because that is what we modeled our format after. So for all the people that listen, that's why. That's what we modeled after.
They're number one for a reason. So please check them out. We love them. Ladies, you did amazing. We love you. Brooklyn loves you. Please come back.
I have a very short little thing from Reddit that I saw that was kind of interesting because Kristi's got a pretty crazy episode for us today.
Yeah.
So we want to get right to that. So I got this off of Reddit. User is 2 otters in a coat.
I like that name a lot.
A guy I know is a boat mechanic. So one Saturday, he's on all alone in the shop doing some work on a boat, and suddenly he comes to and he's on the ground. He knew there was water underneath the boat he'd been working on, so he assumes he's been electrocuted. He's vaguely aware of someone behind him, so he starts yelling, "Help, help, I've been electrocuted." And he hears whoever is behind him leave. He keeps yelling, and eventually a guy in a neighboring business hears him and comes to his aid. When he's at the hospital, he finds out he wasn't electrocuted. Someone had hit him on the back of the head with his own mallet. Nothing was stolen from the shop, meaning someone, who was never caught, was just walking by and spontaneously decided to hit him on the back of the head with the mallet for no reason. I just think this is so creepy. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Like, it's short, but, like, this really stuck out to me because I'm like, no fucking reason. They didn't steal anything. They literally, you have to just be walking by someone and be like, all right, I'm going to hit him in the back of the head, and then the person just left.
But it's pretty crazy that the reality is that that's entirely possible.
Yeah, completely possible.
That's terrible. People are the worst.
People are the worst.
Stop being so terrible, everybody. Speaking of society sucking, let's get into my case here.
Very excited to hear this because Kristi's been telling me all week about this crazy case.
I have rewritten the story about 9 times. I kid you not, because there's so much to talk about. Like, I was almost to the point where I was like overwhelmed because I was like, do I even want to cover this case?
Yeah, she told me a few times this week that, and then she was like, I need to pick an easier case.
Yeah, like from here on out, it's all going to be simple stuff because this one was so, the web of crap that goes into it is just bananas. And like the fact that it took this long for it to get recognized, and it's sad that it's still not recognized to the extent that it should be, which is one of the reasons I stuck it out and continued to try to get this case out here, because this case needs to be discussed more often. It is a Canadian crisis, and it's something that is not discussed, that I hadn't heard of until I started looking into just more outside of the United States. No, I mean, maybe this part. So luckily you don't fit the profile, and that's the fucked up part about this. But it's hard for me for several reasons. I'm a woman, so when you read about women disappearing, it's really difficult to kind of get through. But I'm also a minority woman. I guess I can be passed off to some people in the minority world as white or Caucasian, but ironically not in a Caucasian world. So as somebody that kind of grasp these both worlds, I can understand how profiling and how dangerous it is for assumptions to just stop these cases from going forward. And this is a big issue, not only in Canada, but around the world, but specifically for this particular case in this one stretch in British Columbia. And it's crazy. So let me just get into it right now for you. Women around the world are stepping out in droves to demand what should be given to us. The right to choose, the right to earn, even the right to drive in some parts of the globe. We are for the first time in a long while demanding equality on all levels. The patriarchy has been fighting back this gender war, implementing policies that impede our rights and, equally important, our safety in our homelands. Unfortunately, however, this is not a new concept for women everywhere. Sisters, daughters, and mothers should be considered precious commodities. Yet we all know women are targeted more so than males when it comes to violent crimes. According to Wikipedia, the trend results from 2003 to 2012 showed most crimes are still committed by men, with around 88% of homicides and 75% of all illegal felonies, leaving so many women vulnerable all the time, no matter where you are. And I know there's people out there that pretend that this isn't the reality.
Ignoring it doesn't mean it's not the reality.
Or they try to come up with this, like, men are equally in danger too.
We're not saying that violent crimes don't happen to men, but statistically, it happens to women more. Period,
point blank. In this one area in Canada, many women walk around with a fear in their conscience for their female loved ones, considered a national crisis by many Canadians and this podcaster as well. The federal government announced in 2015 that it would launch an inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. In that same year, Carol Bennett, Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Canada, claimed that the national number of murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada is high enough to declare this one of the greatest losses of life in Canada's history. Here is the unfortunate reality of an area famously known as the Highway of Tears.
That already sounds horrible.
There is a road technically called Yellowhead Highway 16 and is a part of the Trans-Canadian Highway System in British Columbia that is 724 kilometers in length, or roughly 450 miles for us weirdo Americans, and goes from Prince Rupert on the northeast coast of British Columbia to the central interior city of Prince George, British Columbia. Now, I'm a fan of Canada. I feel like Canada is everyone's kind of forgotten cousin, so I'm going to explain Canada to people that might not understand Canadian territory. British Columbia is what we in the United States would say the west part, so the western. So if you looked at a map of like where Oregon, California, parts of Arizona kind of interject, British Columbia is above that area. Okay. So that's British Columbia. So just to give everybody an idea out there, because I know people don't really know Canada. And until I really became obsessed with Canada about 10 years ago, right after college when I was considering moving there, I didn't know very much about it myself. So just breaking it down so people kind of get the image of where I'm talking about here. The pretty scenic views when you Google this 500 miles north of the U.S. border area looks amazing. Fresh air and nature, vast trees, clear streams, a beautiful river where people actively salmon fish, a place where one could feel safe and far away from everyday life as this logging route takes you from one friendly-looking town to another. The highway, however, offers a false sense of safety and is a menacing road, one women should avoid walking or trekking solo across at all times. This strip of highway seems to welcome a lot of sinister behavior. Many women and girls have disappeared or been found murdered along what the locals now refer to as the Highway of Tears. The highway is part of a larger national crisis of murdered and Indigenous women and girls in Canada that date back 50 years.
So it's dating back 50 years. You literally have a name for this highway and people are just now starting
55 decades, half of a century long, with several of these crimes that have gone completely unsolved. The exact number of women who have disappeared or been murdered along Highway 16 is really all about who you ask. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police Force, which is like the dopest name for the cops, would tell you 18 victims and disappearances in its list of Highway of Tears cases, dating from 1969 to 2006.
Definitely more than that.
The RCMP also included women who have disappeared from two different highways, 97 and 5 in British Columbia. So they're considering other murders as just 18. Locals will tell you it's at least 33 women, but the figures go even higher from here on out. Even higher, which we're going to get into. This case is vast, and I can only give you a glimpse of what these unfortunate victims and what little we know of their stories, because there's very little information online about their personal lives, little evidence of any reasons why these particular women were even targeted. So I'm going to go through a couple of the women that were victims for this unfortunate highway. It begins as far back as they can tell in 1969. Gloria Moody was 27 years young. She had 2 kids and was on a road trip with her brother, family tripping. So having a good time, seeing sights, seeing family. On October 25th, 1969, she and her brother were bar hopping around enjoying themselves. She was last seen at the 3rd bar with her brother and others at the Hotel Ranch in Williams Lake off Highway 29. So she's bar hopping with her brother. People are witnessing.
Bars, people see them.
They've been around hanging out. When her brother left that bar, he assumed his sister was right behind him. So he's assuming, okay, we're leaving the bar. It's over.
Leaving.
Like,
so leaving.
We're
right.
leaving. The very next day, October 26th, her body was found 10 kilometers, about 6 miles from Williams Lakes by hunters on a cattle trail. She was sexually assaulted and battered badly, and the injury sustained was the cause of death. Despite multiple persons of interest, no one was ever arrested or charged. A police officer later told her family in 1998 that the 3 main suspects were all dead and all leads were gone. So this woman died in 1969.
So 30 years later, you want to
tell me? In 1998, they're basically telling them they're never going to solve this case.
Wait 30 years for an update, and your update is, well, everybody died?
Pretty much.
Nice.
A year after Gloria's death, in July 1970, 18-year-old Micheline Paré, who was from Quebec, was hitchhiking through the area. 2 women picked her up and dropped her off near Tompkins Ranch. So she was safe.
Crazy that she made it through hitchhiking. Like, she survived the hitchhiking part.
Hitchhiking is a big part of this highway.
You kind of go as far as that person will take you, and then you usually have to hitch another ride.
Yes, so hitchhiking culture is very dangerous, especially for women, but hitchhiking is very important in this particular and it was also stretch of highway, and you'll see why later on.
And it's pretty common at that time too, right? Like
fairly common.
We said that in other episodes. At that time,
think about it. The 70s was a crazy time. Period. Everywhere, people hitchhiked. It was kind of normal if you did, because there wasn't a lot of mass public transportation everywhere.
And if you had a long stretch of road like that, people had to hitchhike.
So hitchhiking is a big part of this, and we will get into it. It's gonna be a huge thing. 2 women picked her up and dropped her off near Tompkins Ranch. Micheline Paré. Body was found in August 1970. Like Gloria, she had been sexually assaulted and beaten to death with a blunt weapon. Then, in October 73, so 3 years later roughly, Gail Ways, who was 19, was last seen hitchhiking from a place called Clearwater to her home in Kamloops.
So young.
She was never seen or heard from again. So this is now victim number 3 that I've gone into. A year later, her body was found in a water-filled ditch just south of Clearwater.
So some of their bodies are not even being found right away.
Pamela Darlington, age 19, was last seen also hitchhiking from Kamloops to a local bar in November 73. So a month later.
God, there's not even that much space in between these. You know, normally when you hear of these things, there's like some sort of gap. There's no gap here.
Not at all. Her partly clothed, badly beaten body was found the next day in a river in Kamloops. Monica Ignace, who was 14, was last seen walking by herself along Highway 16 towards home from her school in Thornhill, British Columbia on December 13th, 1974. This is like the week before Christmas break, and that was the last time she was seen. Her body was found 4 months later in a dense wooded area east of Terrace. The cause of death was also strangulation. There's a pattern here, you know what I mean? Like, there's young women that are taken from roughly the same area, very vulnerable, you know what I mean?
Alone.
Yeah, the same manner of death, the same beating, same sexual assaults, like very classic serial killer style of just like, obviously this person has some kind of pattern. In August of that same year, 1974, 16-year-old Colleen McMillan was leaving her home, Lac La Hache, to hitchhike to a friend's house close by. Her body was found 46 kilometers south, or 28 and a half miles of her last known sighting. These poor girls are just like being plucked off the street. Like, that's basically what's happening.
Like normal kids of their age trying to go to a friend's house the way they know how. It's just sad.
Definitely. Monica Jack was the next victim and was the youngest victim of the Highway of Tears
14.
At age 12.
Jesus.
Monica was last seen riding her bike in May 1978. Her mother saw Monica riding her bike home from shopping and offered to drive her the rest of the way. I can only imagine, like, I thought about this. I'm sure her mother probably thought over and over about this moment in her life. And
why did I drive her home?
Monica, being the preteen, wanted to finish her bike ride the rest of the way home. And at that age, everyone wants... You want that little bit of independence, you know what I mean? Like,
you're at that age where you're like, you don't want to be seen with your mom all the time.
And you think you're becoming a woman, but you're still your child. And so, you know, I'm sure her mom probably kicks herself up, every single time, and she shouldn't, because that's a very normal reaction, and this shouldn't be happening, but that is what happened. Her bike was found later, but Monica vanished. Her whereabouts remained unknown until 17 years later. In 1995, forestry workers found Monica's remains in a ravine off a logging road about 20 kilometers or 125 miles where Monica's bike was found. They were able to confirm her identity through dental records and DNA. It was also evident, too, that she was sexually assaulted and strangled to death. On May 8th, 1981, 33-year-old Maureen Mosey was presumed to be hitchhiking from Salmon Arm to Kamloops, 16 kilometers east, or 9.9 miles east of Kamloops. Maureen's lifeless, beaten body was found by a woman walking her dog. This time, though, someone finally saw something. Witnesses say they saw Maureen get into a vehicle with a man, quote, late 20s or early 30s with black or brown hair and a beard. So not very descriptive.
That can literally be anybody.
That could literally be any human being in the world, but at least
they saw something.
They
after
saw
all of these girls.
something, at least. 16-year-old Shelley Ann Bosque was last seen walking along Highway 16, again, same stretch, towards home in Hinton in 1983 at about 8:30 at night. Her body has yet to be found.
Oh, man.
A few days after her disappearance, personal possessions, including school books and clothing of Shelley Ann's, were found near the Athabasca River. There was also blood found by the river that matches Shelley Ann's blood type. Another victim is Alberta Williams. She was 24, was last seen in Prince Rupert in August of 1989. She got into a truck with her uncle Jack and a man described as only a non-native man.
That's everybody.
Her remains were found 3 weeks later on September 25th, 1989, 37 kilometers or 28-ish miles east of Prince Rupert. What struck me strange about Alberta's situation was that her uncle was with her.
Right.
So I actually I Googled her a little further. Turns out that there's actually a CBC original podcast about Alberta Williams' case. It's called Who Killed Alberta Williams? Yeah, because it's, again, I'm going through these so quickly. These are woman after woman. You could take every single individual female and make your own podcast about each of these girls. I'm trying to get through this as respectfully but thoroughly as possible because there's so much to cover.
She's the first one that someone was with her.
Right, and the circumstances are odd because it seems that the family dynamic was strange, and there was a moment where it seemed like Jack could have known more than he should have. It's super complicated, and all these cases are super fucking complicated. But Alberta Williams, there was some interesting evidence that was found through journalists, and it's gone from there. So I haven't listened to the podcast. I will, definitely. It's now on but it's called Who Killed Alberta Williams? So recommending it without listening to it, just because these are important people and they deserve some attention, not just in Canada. Alberta had also been strangled and sexually assaulted.
So that's the same thing as everybody else, just that little tidbit of her being with her. The only side of it's still on the same stretch.
That I so far have understood about the case. Again, I haven't really, this was like my 9th or 8th edition revision of this case. And I ran across that and was like, you know what, I can't. If I continued from there, then I would go into this rabbit hole and I would have gotten this case done in another month, and I've been working on this for weeks. So I was just like, let me get there. I could literally, I have to look further into it, and I'll probably do an update. Again, if you want to check it out on your own, be my guest. Yeah. But it's definitely worth mentioning, and I'm going to recommend it. I'll put it on the recommendations right now without even listening to it. So that same year, 1989, Cecilia Ann Nicol was 15, and she disappeared in October and was last seen in Smithers, British Columbia, near Highway 16 as well. In a horrendous twist, the year after Cecilia's disappearance, her cousin Delphine Nicol disappeared on June 19th, 1990. Both girls have never been found. So this family has lost 2 girls now from some fucking monster. Ramona Wilson was 16 when she was last seen at her home in Smithers on June 11th, 1994. So again,
at this point, we're like
Smithers,
years
like Kamloops, the same areas, Highway 16, like it's the same areas, same strip right here. It was thought that she was hitchhiking to friends waiting in the town of Hazelton, but Ramona never showed up. Ramona's remains were found nearly a year later in April in a wooded area west of Smithers Airport. Though no official cause of death has ever been released, someone on the inside told the family strangulation and a, quote, sexual motivation were likely.
All the other girls?
Like the other girls. The same year of Ramona's abduction and murder, 15-year-old Roxanne Thiara was last seen in Prince George in July 94. She must have had a rough life because by age 15 she had turned to sex work to live.
And of course, once you're a sex worker, they don't care.
They don't care. On the night she went missing, she told friends she was meeting a John for work or like a client or whatever you want to call them. Her friend saw her turn across the apartment and she was never seen alive again. Her body was found weeks later in a bush near an elementary school along Highway 16 West. She died via stabbing.
So she's different already. So this is no longer strangulation.
It's still a really strange coincidence that it would be in the same area.
Girl.
Nicole Orr, age 24, went missing on June 21st, 2002. Nicole was hitchhiking from Prince George to Smithers to surprise her sister with a birthday visit. She was last seen at a gas station on Highway 16, west of Prince George. This time there were witnesses. At the gas station on Gauthier Road, she approached a car with a male inside, and the description is Caucasian, between 20 and 35 years old, wearing a short-sleeved white t-shirt. Okay, so basically any guy off the highway.
Any dude driving down the highway. And you know what's weird? That the last
time they
were witnesses was years ago, and it was still the same date range. And a very, like, vague description.
Needless to say.
Anyone.
Could be anybody. And
some white dude in a white t-shirt. It's anybody.
Any white guy.
They didn't even say, like, a hair color or anything.
Nothing.
Just, like, a dude in a shirt.
Well, the last one was brown or black with a beard. White guy in his 20s or 30s, and this is a white guy in his 20s or 30s with a white t-shirt, so his t-shirt's changed. Nicole's body has also never been found. Tamara Chipman was 22 and a mother to a toddler when she was last seen on September 21st, 2005 in Prince Rupert hitchhiking east towards Terrace on Highway 16. Tamara was known to be engaged in sex work, and there were warrants out for her arrest for failure to appear on an assault charge. Tamara was not immediately reported as missing because family kind of thought she'd been avoiding the law, but police now believe Tamara was the victim of foul play. She too has been missing ever since. Aliyah Sarek Auger was a secondary school student who at the age of 14 was last seen near a black van in Prince George on February 2nd, 2006. Her body was found 8 days later in a ditch on Highway 16, 20 kilometers east or 12 and a half miles east of Prince George. 20-year-old Madison Scott vanished on May 28, 2011, after attending a party at Hogsback Lake, a campsite about 25 kilometers south or 15 and a half miles south of Vanderhoof. She intended to crash at the campsite with her girlfriend Jordy after the party, but a fight between some guys broke out, and Madison's friend Jordy, who was drunk and became injured because of the fight, decided to leave with her boyfriend instead of opting to stay at the campsite with Madison, which was the original plan. Madison, however, decided to stay at the tent and was last seen at about 3 a.m. at the party. 2 days later, after not returning home, her parents went to the lake to try to locate her and only found the tent next to the truck, and the tent was flattened like she was getting ready to go. Her purse was found in the truck, but there was no sign of her car keys or her cell phone. So it almost looks like she walked away
and was like coming back.
And coming back, ready to go, and then never came back. Foul play is suspected, and she's been missing since, and this was not far from Highway 16 as well. So you may have asked yourself, how in the Sam hell do these women keep going missing off this highway? Well, for one thing, the region is characterized by poverty, and until 2017 didn't have any real public transportation.
And then you're asking why people hitchhike.
We're talking about 450 miles or 724 kilometers of distance.
Hitchhike. That's why you said it was important.
With no public transportation.
And these kids are young, and a lot of them are probably too young to drive, or too young or too poor to afford a car. So how the hell else are they supposed to get anywhere?
They now have buses, but they now run on a very limited schedule, which forces many local residents to hitchhiking to get around who cannot afford a car. So even though they've attempted to make this, it's still a failed system in that it's not like here. Yeah, it sucks to wait 10, 12 minutes in the snow or the rain, but you know our transportation will come. Right. Imagine you knowing, okay, after 8 p.m., I can no longer get home, or I can't get to work, and I work at night, or whatever the case may be. Or you're 16 and you want to visit your friends, and your family's poor and doesn't have a car. Or you want to be a normal teen and just go out for a few hours. Like, it sucks. It's a shitty situation. Yeah. And we, as New Yorkers, we complain all the time about the MTA, but we're actually fortunate that we can get around, and this is not an issue for us.
There's no 400-mile road stretch that we can't get anywhere.
But this is what also makes these cases especially difficult, because young ladies and women stick their thumb out for a ride from with a complete stranger and essentially disappear, because if their work or personal schedule doesn't align with the bus, or they miss the bus, what other choice do they have? Before that, there wasn't even buses as an option. So what else? How else would you get around? You had the option. That's all there was to get a ride if you had no friend that had a car. There are signs throughout this highway that state, quote, no hitchhiking, but if you have somewhere to be, the options are pretty inadequate.
Well, how are you going to put up a sign that says no hitchhiking, but then put no bus in the area?
Right. Aside from the poverty of these areas with very little assistance from anyone or any institution, there are numerous municipalities and 23 First Nations communities that border the Highway of Tears. 23 First Nations is a type of tribe. Indigenous group argue that the number the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, give reflects only disappearances and murders that have happened in the specific geographic areas around these highways, and not the real numbers. Each reported case of a woman's disappearance or confirmation of a recovered body has a snowballing effect within the First Nations community along the highway and all across Canada, one of growing fear, frustration, and sorrow. This is especially important because, as mentioned before, the RCMP 18 victims on the Highway of Tears case, but according to the Indigenous community, the number is actually closer to 50.
That makes sense.
And even if you think about it, 10 out of the 18 victims that the RCMP recognize as victims of the Highway of Tears are Indigenous. So they're still represented as over half.
They're over half the victims. 18 just seems like too low of a number, because I'm listening to you tell me the years that these girls are going missing, and there are multiple girls going missing for over a decade. So it doesn't make sense that the victim count is at 18. It just doesn't.
And it's also it seems like there's a cooling off period,
right,
where it's like months really quickly, and then it's cooled off, and then the 80s, it's really, really quick succession. That is a cooling off period for a serial killer. I'm pretty sure the FBI teaches you that in day one. You know what I mean? We'll get into the reasons why actually right now, because there are explanations for it that people don't like to hear, but it is the reality. According to the website, the Canadian Encyclopedia.ca, First Nations is a term used to describe Aboriginal peoples in Canada who are not Métis or Inuit. And there are more than 1.3 million people in Canada who identified as being First Nations heritage. According to Human Rights Watch, an international non-governmental organization that conducts research and advocacy on human rights, British Columbia has the highest rate of unsolved murders of Indigenous women and girls in Canada, but this problem isn't only in British Columbia itself. In 2015, an inquiry into the murdered and missing girls claimed that the national number of Indigenous women and girls is likely 1,200. However, as of recently, the RCMP confirmed that 1,200 is closer, but now there's another statistic I found today that I thought was crazy. The Native Women's Association of Canada suggests that it can be up to 4,000. 4,000 Aboriginal girls and women have gone missing off this highway. With Indigenous women representing 4% of Canada's population, yet the number of Indigenous women killed throughout Canada is 16% of female homicides. So they represent such a small percentage of people's,
pretty large percentage of the crime.
Of deaths are in their community. The pattern is eerie to say the least. Aboriginal girl or woman getting a ride, then is never seen alive again. It wasn't until Nicole Orr, a white woman, went missing in June 2002 that extensive search parties began looking for her and the media began picking the story up. Meanwhile, the year before, a Native woman went missing and barely got any attention. And I'm not going to get super into the politics of this here. 64,000 Black women go missing annually in the United States. And we don't know how many Latin people go missing in the United States. Do you know why? Because we're considered white when they label us into the race category of missing people. But how many colored people do we see go missing on TV? Right. Not very often. So it's not something that's unfamiliar with not just Canada, not just the United States, but it's a global problem. We care about the blonde, blue-eyed people. We don't care about the people that look like everybody else. And it shouldn't matter what you look like. It should matter that you're a human being that needs the help.
4,000 women went missing from a highway, not where
in 50 years. Right. No one batted an eye until 2015. No one even thought about it. It's not enough that there's been genocide amongst the Native American people throughout all of North America, but we're doing it again by neglecting people are treating them as a hunting ground.
And we're already dismissed as women. It's just like a whole other wrench thrown in there when they're Indigenous women.
To go further into this, a 2012 Human Rights Watch investigative report titled "Those Who Take Us Away" revealed a deep distrust of police among Indigenous people in northern British Columbia due to experiences of discrimination and abuse. So there's also, I literally put no shit right there. That's so funny. In October 2015, an email scandal among government officials in British Columbia raised doubt about the handling of the investigation. People connected to the case admitted that they would delete emails regarding these cases. So their family members would reach out or people would have tips and they would delete it. A 65-page report written by Elizabeth Denham, the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner, outlines how government officials, quote, triple deleted emails relating to the Highway of Tears, permanently removing them from the government's computer system. Denham argued that officials breached the Freedom of Information and Protected and Privacy Act. So, goes to show you, because what happens is in many of these cases, police called the missing Indigenous women sex workers or drug addicts. And that's what families would go in there talking to the police saying, my daughter's missing. And that's the first thing they would say is, oh, she's a prostitute, or oh, she's probably a drug addict and she's out in the street.
If you feel offended right now, you probably should, but not for the reasons that you might think. You have to be offended at the fact that 4,000 women went missing in 50 years and nobody gave a shit. You have to care about the fact that sex workers are completely disregarded by police. They are people, they have feelings, and it doesn't matter what you do for work or why. It just matters that you're a human being and something happened to you. And they don't give a shit. And we're not the first people to point it out. And we won't be the last people to point it out, but it needs to be pointed out.
A lot of you might be asking yourself, what's Canada doing about it? In response to some commonalities between the murders of the three women, Alicia Germain, who I didn't get into because there's so many women, Roxanne Thierra and Ramona Wilson, which is the three women, the British Columbia RCMP's Unsolved Homicide Unit created Project E-PANA. I'm going to refer to it, I don't know if this is correct, as EPANA, because I don't want to have to keep saying E-PANA. So I'm going to call it EPANA. In 2005, to investigate other cases of murdered and missing women and girls in the area along Highway 16. This project was named in part after an Inuit word describing the spirit goddess that looks after souls just before they go to heaven or are reincarnated. In 2005, when Ipana first launched, the RCMP identified 9 victims who had gone missing or had been murdered along Highway 16 from 1989 to 06. Alicia Germain, Roxanne Thierra, Ramon Wilson, Aaliyah Sarek Auger, Tamara Chipman, Nicole Orr, Lana Derrick, Delphine Nical, and Alberta Williams. The RCMP used 3 criteria according to their website when reviewing the cases of missing and murdered women. The victim was involved in a high-risk activity that would expose them to danger, such as hitchhiking or being involved in street trade, aka sex work.
And the final criteria is that they were female.
All but one of these victims, Nicole Orr, were Indigenous. In order to broaden the investigation, the RCMP used the computer system V-Class, Violent Crime Linkage Analysis System, as well as other databases and missing persons records. In addition, the geographic area under investigation increased from 724 kilometers, or 293 miles, from Prince Rupert, BC to Prince George, BC, to approximately 1,500 kilometers, 932 miles, which included not only Highway 16 to Hinton, Alberta, but also sections of Highway 97 and 5. So they finally expanded the investigation, right? Because they would just I guess what would happen is someone would they would write it down locally, and then a detective would take it, not really go anywhere with it, and then that was it.
But they need to be.
They finally made a unit specifically designed for this that took over and actually did the research and the investigation. This led to RCMP to the victims from 9 to 18, all of whom were murdered or disappeared over a 37-year period, again from 1969 to 2006. The 9 additional Highway of Tears victims are Shelley Bosque, Maureen Mosey, Monica Jack, who was the 12-year-old girl, Monica Ignace, Colleen McMillan, Pamela Darrington, Gail Ways, Micheline Pare, and Gloria Moody. In 2012, Ipana was able to assist in the capture of a man who murdered 16-year-old Colleen McMillan, who disappeared in 1974, and it turned out to be an American serial killer named Bobby Jack Fowler.
That's very interesting.
Bobby Jack Fowler was a transient construction worker who traveled all across North America. He spent his time roaming in North America to such places as British Columbia, Florida, Iowa, Louisiana, Texas, Oregon, South Carolina, a slew of other states. Although he had a crazy long record. I mean, I'm not even going to get into him because I'll probably do an episode on this guy because he's that insane. Although he had a crazy long record in the United States, the RCMP had no record of him. So even though he had this insanely long, ridiculously long record in the United States,
was it because he was from the United States and not from Canada?
Right. He's only gotten arrested in the United States.
So they wouldn't have that.
They wouldn't have that information in BC. Turns out Fowler was hired by a company called Happy Roofing Company in 1974 in Prince George, where he spent a ton of time going up and down, you guessed it, Highway 16 West. After looking at Fowler more, he was suspected to be responsible for 2 other women of the Highway of Tears list, Gail Ways and Pamela Darlington, both who went missing in 1973. Fowler unfortunately died in prison of lung cancer in 2006 after being convicted of 2 murders in Oregon in the United States. The RCMP believe that he may have also killed anywhere from 7 and possibly as many as 20 victims. Although they believe Fowler is not responsible for any deaths along Highway 16 between 1989 and 2006, according to geographic profiler Kim Rosmo, since Fowler went to prison in 96. So because he got arrested in the United States, she doesn't believe he was active at the time. So she's kind of pinpointed him as the 70s serial killer. That's kind of how...
So there's more than one. We're just
there's several. There's a
they just happen to know that they're not going to get caught on this stretch.
This highway is a breeding ground for serial killers and monsters. That's what this is.
This dude's from the United fucking States and came here to kill a bunch of people. So
there are 2 other suspects off the Highway of Tears. In 2014, Cody Lejvikoff was convicted of the murder of Lauren Leslie, a 15-year-old girl he hunted online. Her body was found on November 2010 on a remote logging road just off Highway 27 near Vanderhoof. Police also tied him to the murders of Lauren Leslie, Natasha Montgomery, and Jill Stunchenko, who disappeared in 2009 to 2010 when he was only 19 and 20 years old. He was given life with a chance of parole after 25 years. Why does he get a chance of parole? Canada, they're too nice. The other suspect was in 2014. Gary Taylor Hanlon was charged with the murder of Monica Jack.
That's the 12-year-old.
The 12-year-old girl who went missing from 1978, and Catherine Mary Herbert. Police say Hanlon was already a suspect, but there wasn't enough evidence at the time.
Right.
In 1979, he was arrested and given 18 years for a rape conviction, but his sentence was reduced after 12 years. So, this was before he was caught with Monica Jack's murder. But he was found guilty again in 2019, so this just recently happened, making Monica Jack's murder the first official murder to be solved by Ipana off the Highway of Tears with full court proceedings and sentencing.
Fuck yes.
About fucking time. No new cases have been added to the RCMP investigation since 2007, and the RCMP reports that since the creation of IPANA, they have collected 750 DNA samples, conducted 2,500 interviews, investigated 1,413 persons of interest, and administered 100 polygraphs, according to Canadian Encyclopedia.ca. Although crimes are currently attempting to be solved, women are still going missing. Another woman as recent as 2018.
Oh, God.
Theorists believe multiple serial killers have haunted and hunted these highways for the last 50 years, and most cases will remain unsolved.
Well, no shit. I would go if I was a serial killer. I would go there too if I knew I wasn't gonna get caught.
So what is Canada doing about this? They're just kind of getting around to figure out how this will work to avoid the loss of life, as opposed to trying to catch people after the fact.
Oh, okay.
So I understand they are looking for the investigation, but I think they took too long to proactively avoid murders. That's my criticism here. After much public pressure, BC Transit started 3 new bus routes along Highway 16 in 2017. One actively services the areas between Smithers and Morristown. The other 2 buses service the area between Burns Lake and Smithers and between Burns Lake and Prince George. Greyhound Canada announced in 2018 that it would stop servicing routes along the Highway of Tears, as well as other stops across Canada. So I guess it kind of felt like, oh, they don't really need us there, or they maybe felt salty, or I don't really know what exactly went down.
3 whole bus routes were added.
But the mayor of Smithers, Taylor Bachrach, argued that the expanded local transit service along the Highway of Tears does not make up for the services Greyhound offered. So he or she, I can't remember, is still fighting for Greyhound to continue going. So they're trying to make sure that there's still options. The province's Minister of Transportation says she plans to work with the communities affected by this service disruption to, quote, ensure their transportation's needs are met. But we'll see. That sounds like a very political answer. Right. So we'll see how this works.
That sounds like a very, I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear answer.
Yeah. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who, by the way, is political crush ever.
Oh my God, me too.
Well, I don't know.
Google him shirtless.
Yeah. And the Liberal Party have actually allocated $8.4 billion towards the investigation and figuring out how exactly they can work with the tribe, with the Indigenous peoples. He deems the total renewal of Canada's relationships with its Indigenous people.
See, he's not just hot, he does shit.
He cares. Yes.
He does do shit.
So this was a really difficult case for me to break down because there are just so many faces of women who have seemingly fallen off the face of the earth. It took me multiple times writing this, as I said, just to decide who to put on this list because it's a scary long list of women who are innocently trying to get where they needed to go. If you are a host of a true crime podcast and you're listening now, I please encourage you to research and discuss this case because no woman should have to fear a highway right outside their homes. And for all my lovely Canadian people out there, please be careful.
That's I don't even know what to say. That was crazy and scary and sad. And then it hits a little bit harder when it's recent because we talk about a lot of cases that happened a long time ago and we'd like to think they don't happen anymore, and then this is kind of right there, still going on.
And I also think we tend to forget that we are, like I said, fortunate in transportation here that, you know, we don't have to worry about the safety. Of course, you have to be afraid and stay awake during the train and that and the third.
It has its own dangers, course, but not of me
you're not on a 450-mile highway. You know, it looks beautiful, but where do you go to run if you need any help? Or there's these little towns that are sleepy that close down, or no way to get home, or
before someone sees someone else.
No, they said, I was doing some basic research, like I said, and people were, of course, I went through Reddit because that's always where I go to try to dig. And so I was on Reddit, and people were saying, I've been on this strip, and you will go hours without seeing a car go by. So this is
it's like a serial killer.
It's a breeding ground there. It's a breeding ground. I don't know if there's no cameras. I don't know how it works up there. I've never been there myself personally. If you're up there and you want to, feel free to email us and describe it to us, the eerieamericas@gmail.com. I would love to hear someone's perspective that is from Canada. That would be amazing, because like this is
picture or anything.
This is serious. Like, this is something that I think a lot of people need to be more aware of, and I'm very saddened when I researched this and saw that there's not enough people covering this case. Like, this has to be spoken about more.
This is one of our probably more serious episodes. We're usually joking around, but there's really nothing to joke around about here. It's a serious situation that kind of needs to be brought to people's attention. So, yeah.
So please don't forget, just because Canada is peaceful and everyone there is nice and we crack jokes here about this, that, and the third, doesn't mean that they don't have their own real problems there too. You know, we need to be aware of our surrounding neighbors and we
need to care even though it's not here. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about it.
Perfectly stated, Vix. Let's not preach. Let's get into our Who Does That, shall we?
Which is probably perfect because this is a super heavy episode. So I'm going to get into something.
Who does that? Who does that? Who does that? Who does that?
I always try not to do this, but Florida, you just keep coming to me.
Vicky always finds the Florida ones. I'll manage to avoid the Florida ones just because I'm like, okay, that's a good one, but I can find something else. And she's like, this is too good. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Go for it.
I actually had multiple. I had 3 today, and they were all from Florida. And the thing is that, like, some of them have the Florida in the title, but some of them don't. And I would read and be like, shit, this is from Florida. From fox5ny.com, which I will never read from, but, you know, this time I will. Florida woman charged with assault after admitting to throwing coconut at man outside strip club.
What are you doing with the coconut outside of a strip club?
What, you don't carry a coconut outside of a strip club?
Doesn't everyone have a coconut outside a strip club?
It's my preferred choice of weapon. Fox News. A Florida woman was charged with assault after she allegedly threw a coconut at a man outside of a strip club. Shanta Bowles, 36, was arrested Saturday after the incident at the VIP Gentlemen's Club in Key West. While sitting on the front porch of the club, a man reportedly began to film Bowles, which upset her, she allegedly told officials. The man said Bowles yelled at him and called him names before proceeding to throw a coconut at him, according to an arrest report obtained by Fox News. No word on how she got the fucking coconut.
And she's a stripper?
She was just sitting on the porch. I don't know if she's an actual stripper. Probably, but it doesn't say it.
If I'm a girl that doesn't work there, I'm not just gonna sit on the strip club porch and just be like chilling.
I still want to know where she got the coconut. But Bowles reportedly admitted to investigators that she did, in fact, throw a coconut at the man, but noted, quote, it did not hit him. Police told the woman she was outside of the club and had no expectation of privacy while there. So I guess she was a stripper, and he felt that because she was a stripper, which is kind of sad. Like, you leave the strip club and now you have no expectation. You have no expectation of privacy, so he's just like allowed to film you, which is why she carried coconut. Bowles was arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So a coconut
is a deadly weapon?
He didn't die.
I guess you could kill somebody with a coconut if you try hard enough. But isn't anything a deadly weapon if you try hard enough?
Right.
I knew a guy in college, his hands were registered as a deadly weapon because he got into a bar fight and broke a guy's face because he was like 6'8" and he was like a monster. I mean, he was a nice guy, but all he had to do was clock a guy and his hand became a deadly weapon.
Then I guess it's a deadly weapon. I still want to know why she was hanging outside a strip club with a fucking coconut.
You know what? This is Miami, though. I mean, maybe she saw one of those little like cocoa ladies. Maybe she sits outside the club giving people coconuts. No, I mean, that is a perfect placement. Guy comes out all hard or sweaty, or the dancer comes out all parched. You're the little lady with the coconut. And then it's also a weapon. It's a win-win for everybody. This is a step forward for womankind, I have to say.
Stop carrying those coconuts, ladies. Carry a coconut. I don't even like coconut, so it's just going to be a weapon.
I'm surprised you're not allergic to coconut. I feel like that.
I actually don't even know if I'm allergic to coconut because I don't like it, but my brother is, so
possible.
There's never coconut around me. I really don't like the taste of it. I think it's weird.
You're the most non-Latin woman I know. Like, you're the most Latin, non-Latin ever because you don't like any tropical stuff.
I like avocado.
No, but like you're allergic to pineapple. You don't like coconut. Do you even do papaya or?
No, I do mango.
There you go. Okay, mango, but that's about it.
Mango with hot sauce. Come on.
All right, that's pretty Latina. I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
The lady was in the train station that day and I didn't have any cash. It was so sad. But anyway, and again, this was a really important episode, and we hope you got the message. Give us a review, subscribe, email us, IG us, Twitter us, whatever us.
But most importantly, stay weird, Americas. Bye.